and we're glad to be here in front of the ad hoc committee. It's great to see many of you that I know, building some new relationships with some of the others, I hope, going forward. As the chairman said, I chair the subcommittee on energy, climate, and grid security, formerly the energy subcommittee of the Energy and Commerce Committee, which is one of the oldest committees in the United States Congress. We cover about 78% of the U.S. economy under that committee, but I'm focused on the energy component of it, and now climate as it relates to energy and grid security, which is so important. I'm an all-the-above energy guy. Let me just be clear about that. I like wind, solar, hydrogen, emerging technologies, fossil fuels, nuclear power, all of the above. And it all should be part of the energy matrix for this nation and for this state. When I think about energy, there's two broad components to energy. One is transportation fuels, and that's, of course, gas and oil, diesel fuel, but it's also electricity for EVs. So when you think about transportation fuels, it's all of those. And then there's baseload power generation, and that is what provides the power for these lights, your refrigerator at home for a cold drink, but also the energy available for manufacturing in this state. The governor's done a great job with attracting economic development projects, but at the end of the day, they are going to need energy in order to build whatever widget they're making for the economy. So think about that. I want to focus today primarily not on transportation fuels, although electric vehicles and electric generation is part of it. I'd like to focus a little bit on baseload power generation first and foremost. There's some handouts in the package that we gave you. I want to turn first and foremost to the article in the U.S., in the Wall Street Journal rather, SOS for the U.S. electric grid. And you can read that at your leisure, but I want to point out in the second paragraph, closer to the bottom, where it says this: fossil fuel power plants are retiring much faster than renewable sources are getting developed, which could lead to energy imbalances. That's a delicate way of saying that you can expect shortages and blackouts. The next paragraph, PJM, which is the power provider, typically generates a surplus of power owing to its large fossil fuel fleet, which it exports to neighboring grids in the Midwest and the Northeast. When wind power plunged in the Midwest and central states late last week, PJM helped fill the gap between supply and demand and kept the lights on. You can read the rest of the article at your leisure. This just about happened around Christmas, as you're aware, here in South Carolina and multiple states in the Southeast and the Ohio Valley, Ohio and other states. And so when we think about baseload power generation, the chart in your folder and the one that's in front of me basically shows baseload power generation. So if you look at the line at the very top, the darker black line, that's basically your baseload power generation or the customer's demand. How much power is needed on a daily basis to meet the customers of the utilities, okay? So if you look at that top line. In South Carolina, 58% of our electrical power, plus or minus, is generated by nuclear power at stations like Oconee, V.C. Summer, Catawba, and Robinson. And they're run by Dominion, Duke, and Duke Progress with respect to the Robinson plant. That's constant power. It's about 1,000 megawatts put out by each nuclear station at full capacity. This power is demanded by residential, manufacturing, and our municipalities across the state of South Carolina. If you look at the blue highlighted section, that is the other power sources, and I'll talk about that in a second. To the far side of that graph, you'll see renewables. And you'll notice that that's a sliding line because renewables provide intermittent power. That power comes on when the sun's shining, and it goes off when the sun goes down. Or it could be a climatic event. It could be a cloud cover, a storm, thunderstorm in the summer, a cloudy day, other times of year. So the amount of power that's provided by the renewable sources, and again, I really appreciate the amount of solar that South Carolina has been able to attract to the state and the amount of power that actually goes on the grid. A lot of it is produced down in the low country, down in Hampton and Jasper and Allendale counties, Orangeburg counties, at least within Dominion's area. Up in my area, Saluda County has a good bit of solar, and then there's smaller solar farms around the state that you'll see as you drive around. So that intermittent or renewable energy, that graph slides back and forth as that power comes on or does not come on or goes off. The part that we need to focus on is the part in the middle, and that is the part that provides that power over and above the 58% that nuclear provides for the state when the sun isn't shining and the demand's there. Like I said, residential, manufacturing municipalities need energy. They need energy 24/7, 365, base load energy to meet their demand. That's what the customers require. In South Carolina, a lot of our power is generated with natural gas and coal. A little bit of oil in the mix, but most of it's natural gas or coal. There is some what's called hydro storage. Bad Creek project up in my district, Pickens County and Oconee County, is part of it. I also have the Parr Reservoir now adjoining my district just outside of Newberry County in Fairfield County. And that's providing hydro storage. What hydro storage is it's water stored as a battery to be released and produce power as demand increases, whether it's a fall off of solar generation or it's an increase in demand as you go home in the evening and you start cooking for the family, washing clothes, cutting the TVs on, or some manufacturing at times that ramp up their production and require a need for immediate power. That's when water is released from Bad Creek and Parr. So hydro storage is included in that. In South Carolina, we've got a need for more natural gas. One of the things that I'm working on in Washington is pipeline permitting. Try to get more natural gas to areas like South Carolina. I remember just in the last couple of years that two of our utilities were planning to run a pipeline to the Carolinas to provide natural gas that they knew we needed. It's called the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. That pipeline was going to bring gas from Pennsylvania, Ohio, Marcellus Shale down to the Carolinas. It's going to stop in North Carolina, but it would have been there to provide natural gas into South Carolina. The Atlantic Coast Pipeline, much like the talked about on the news Mount Valley Pipeline up in West Virginia and Western Virginia area, was part of the infrastructure bill that President Biden signed into law. Joe Manchin helped negotiate, but it still is being litigated by the environmental community trying to stop that pipeline. The question I like to ask folks that don't like or say they don't like fossil fuel generation, is it the fossil fuels you don't like, or is it carbon emissions? Because we can deal with carbon emissions in this country. In fact, the midstream refiners have been capturing carbon for a long time. I was talking with someone the other day that said we had 700 years worth of carbon storage ability in this country and caverns and old oil wells that the carbon can be put into to store. That's something I hope to work on in Congress to allow more carbon sequestration. So I asked the question, is it carbon emissions that you don't like, or is it fossil fuels? The president acknowledged during the State of the Union that we needed fossil fuels for at least 10 more years. I'll tell you, 10 years is used a lot in Washington as a benchmark when you don't know how long we really need it. We budget for 10 years. We do a lot of things spread out over a 10-year period. I can tell you we're going to need fossil fuels for a lot longer than 10 years in order to meet the growing demand in this country, the growing demand in South Carolina. We need that natural gas into South Carolina if we're going to attract industry to come to our state. We're going to continue experiencing the residential growth of the folks that are fleeing some states coming to South Carolina, as we saw during the COVID years, and we continue to see. Once they find the Palmetto State, once they experience what we love about South Carolina, they want part of it too, and they move to South Carolina. So those are some of the things I'm working on in Washington. Really thinking about the future energy needs of this country. Fossil fuels and natural gas being a big part of what we need in South Carolina in the interim. You hear natural gas talked about a lot as a transition fuel. As we transition from current legacy technology, coal-fired, gas-fired power plants, and move more into whatever the future looks like, and it could be more renewables brought onto the system. But keep in mind, they do have intermittency. We need, I heard this term today, fuel diversity. And I love it thinking about it in that context, fuel diversity. A lot of different sources providing energy for our constituents, mine and yours. If you think about renewables, you think about solar farms. They're taking a lot of agriculture out of play to be producing the food that we need. And that's fine. If that's what the landowner wants to do with his property, as a private property owner, that's his prerogative. Generate a source of income. The amount of acreage it takes for a solar farm to produce not even half of what a nuclear power plant will produce, which is about 1,000 megawatts per power plant. And a nuclear power plant can be put on a very small parcel, 50-acre parcel of land with a buffer zone. You see acres and acres and acres. In fact, Mr. Ott, I saw a farm in your area that was 850 acres of solar panels. That's a lot of land to take up to produce a lot less power than a nuclear power plant would produce. So when we talk about the future, I want to think about, first off, I want to mention the House of Representatives in Washington is passing an energy package toward the end of this month. It'll be on the floor for a vote. About 17 different bills deal with environmental and energy issues. Some of them are pipeline issues. Some of them work with cross-border transmission with Canada and Mexico. Some of them are just messaging legislation. But a lot of it will move our nation towards setting benchmarks on where we want to go with our power production in this country. After we get through this energy package at the end of this month, I hope to bring up in my subcommittee a hearing on the future of nuclear power in this country. Now, if you think about what happened in South Carolina with VC Summer, think about the decadal process of permitting, licensing, and then attracting tens of billions of dollars of investment to build new nuclear reactors, traditional design, 1,000-watt light water reactor designs, as you see at VC Summer or Vogtle or Oconee Nuclear Station. And you think, are we going to be able to go through, and can we wait to go through that decadal permitting, licensing process to get a big traditional nuclear power design built? I would probably say no. That's a huge investment, huge risk for the investor, and decadal long process. South Carolina really doesn't have decades to figure out our energy issues in this state. So I hope to have a hearing on what the future of nuclear looks like in this country. Is it advanced nuclear? Is it molten salt reactors? Or is it small modular reactors, which I'm very bullish on? I think small modular reactors will be the answer for states like South Carolina, especially with our shortage of natural gas. But just in the last 60 days, probably less than that, probably 30 days, we saw the first permit issued for a SMR project to come online and start producing, to prove to the world that the technology is there, the technology works, and the technology will provide the power that we need. When we think about small modular reactors, these are small reactors that can provide power to an industrial park, or they can provide power to a large city. Because of the modularization of SMRs, they can be stacked together. And I saw a project recently on paper where 12 SMRs were working in tandem. Some of those SMRs could be taken offline as the baseload power generation wasn't needed, brought back online rapidly to meet the power needs, or brought back to one just to provide enough power to keep the whole system working until it's needed. I think that is the future of nuclear power and where we're headed with power generation in this interim between renewable power and whatever the future looks like. So fuel diversity and SMRs are really what I think that we as a state ought to focus on. Now, what does that mean for you guys as legislators? Honestly, I couldn't tell you. That's for you to decide on what the state wants to do, how the state wants to proceed, and what the state actually can and need to do. The permitting process, then you're going to have transmission lines. If we expand natural gas in this state in the interim, we're going to need the opportunity to expand those distribution pipelines from the main pipeline that brings gas to the Carolinas, distribution pipelines to the utilities, to their power plants, and hopefully utilities will step up if the gas is available and build natural gas-fired power plants until the SMR technology comes online, is approved by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and actually is proven to be safe to provide the electricity that we need for the state. There will be a point in time where South Carolina will meet its baseload saturation where we can't provide enough power for our constituents, for manufacturing. if we don't address this issue sooner rather than later. Hopefully that date's way out in the future, but it could be as early as 5 years. The time is now for the state legislature and for the United States Congress to step up and work on energy issues to meet the needs of our constituents across the nation. And that's really the genesis of my presentation for you today. I'd be glad to try to answer any questions.